Hello everyone. Welcome to episode 12 of the Wool and the Forest podcast. Ayubowan, namaskaram. Welcome everybody on this gorgeous, beautiful, crisp, wintry day in early spring on the Olympic Peninsula where I live, where I'm broadcasting to you from the beautiful far-flung tip of the northwestern part of the United States. My name is Ducky. I am your host on this channel, which is Wool and the Forest on YouTube. I am Wool and the Forest on Instagram, and my website is woolandtheforest.com. And of course, everything I offer here on YouTube, all these videos, all the various different series I offer, it is only made possible by the kind support, encouragement, and generosity of my patrons, who I must take a moment to thank. Thank you so much, patrons, where you can find me on Patreon as patreon.com/woolandtheforest. So, welcome everybody. Any new viewers who are just finding this episode, this video, welcome to the channel. I'm so happy to have you, and many new faces. Many new faces since my last video here on the channel. So welcome to all the new viewers. I hope you'll be happy with all the videos I'm creating. I hope you'll engage in the chatter and that you will feel at home on Wool and the Forest. And my returning viewers, thank you so much for coming back. I'm always so excited now to see the people who regularly come back and view my videos and who engage in the chatter of the comment field and who I get to say hello to and see your little avatars pop up. And even if you don't have an avatar, I'm starting to recognize your names on YouTube, and it always gives me a little a little bit of happiness to see and to say hi. And I'm always so grateful to for all the comments you leave, because I engage with all of them. I read all the comments, and for the vast majority, I actually reply to all your comments. So please do know that I greatly appreciate the time you take in leaving comments, in engaging with the conversation, or simply just saying, hi, I appreciate what you're doing. It's so uplifting, and it gives me the motivation really to keep going. For the longest time, this channel was a very quiet place. And, I had to sort of really dig deep to bring stuff, to keep coming back and, to keep creating these conversations and videos and visual experiences. And that can be, it's its own sort of reward to be self-reliant in your motivation. But when other people are appreciating the work you do and actually expressing it, it's a nice feeling. I'm not dependent on it, but it is a very nice feeling. And it actually has an impact on the quality of the work I do, and sort of impact on how I form these things and how I bring them to you. So thank you so much. And please continue to do so in the comment field. Engage, chat, talk away, and I will respond to all of you. As for the technicalities of the podcast, remember that there are chapters which you can skip along on the bottom of your screen or the side of your screen, depending on which device you're on, and any pertinent information. So whether it's yarns or yarn companies or books or anything at all that I mentioned, people, everyone and everything will be listed in the description box. So if I, even if I don't say something out loud, it will be in the description box below. I make sure to craft those out really carefully to make sure that nobody gets left out or nothing gets left out. So please look there first before you ask questions. I suppose that's what I'm trying to say. So technicalities aside, let's get on with the show. First off, what I'm wearing. Okay, so since we all begin with this, what I'm wearing today is actually not something that I knit. This is this has been knit by human hands, meaning it's not machine knit, but it has been knit on a knitting loom. So just like there are looms for weaving, there are looms for knitting, and they go from anywhere like this size to a little bit longer. And this was knit on a knitting loom, hand knit on a knitting loom in Korea. So I lived in Korea for many, many years. It was almost 5 or 6 years altogether. And it's a place that holds a very special place in my heart. And when I lived there, you know, especially in Seoul, I didn't live in Seoul the whole time, but part of it I did. And in Seoul, there are these lovely garment districts everywhere. And one of the areas that I used to love to go and look at beautifully made clothes was an area called Itaewon. And in Itaewon, especially around autumn and winter, you get these beautiful hand loom knit items popping up all over in these tiny little boutiques. And this was purchased in one of those places. It's made of 100% wool. And like many things I got in Korea, I am loath to part with anything because it's such a special place for me. I had my first baby there, you know, my first home birth, my epic home birth after a marathon 29-hour labor. You know, my first baby was born there, and it's special to me. So not only that, this is the most comfortable, wonderful, wearable knit, one of the most comfortable knit items I have. And I have worn it every single day almost, except for like maybe a few weeks in the hottest part of the summer. I wear it all the time. It's about 10 years, maybe more, 11 years old. Because I purchased it before my first was born. So my first is going to be 10 at the end of the year this year. So it's about 11 years old at least. And I have worn it every day, almost every day. It's always hanging around somewhere in the house. And because it was worn so much, it got, you know, lots of holes and damage in all parts of the garment, even here on the neckband. So last winter, I went ahead and did a lot of repair on it, and all these beautiful big sunflowers that you see, or sunflower type flowers, have been hand embroidered by me to cover up some of those holes and some of that damage on the knitted fabric. So that's wool on wool. So this is wool embroidery, and I think it just brings it alive in the most beautiful, colorful way. And I think I'll be wearing this for at least another 10 years to come. So that's what I'm wearing. I think that's all I need to say about what I'm wearing. And let's move on to the outline of the show. Now, this is where I'm going to refer to my notes in order to keep these episodes manageable. So the first thing we have today is I'm going to introduce the new series that I'm running on my YouTube channel, which is called Amble and Knit. And it's a new series that I started just about 7-8 days ago, depending on when I upload this video, by the way. And the purpose of it is to engage in conversations and bring up topics and issues and things I really want to chat about in the podcast, but would make the podcast much too long. So I've decided to start a supplementary series, a sort of footnote to the main Wool and the Forest podcast. So I'll talk a little bit about that just very quickly, take a few minutes to introduce the new series and to address a few issues that have come up due to the conversations and the wonderful, wonderful engagement that happened in the last episode. The last video that I uploaded on YouTube was actually episode 1 of Amble and Knit. And if you've missed that, if you're just finding this episode, this video, please, I will link it here as a little card, but I'll also link it at the end of the podcast as an end card, so you can click wherever you want and go and check out that video, because the chatter in the comment field is absolutely fantastic. And please feel free to engage with anything that comes up during that video as well. So I will talk a little bit about that and make a few notes. Secondly, we'll move on to, of course, finished items for my knitting. So this is, of course, a knitting podcast, primarily a knitting podcast. And once in a very blue moon, I might bring out some of my other textile work. I am actually a working artist, so knitting is just something I do purely as a joy, a comfort, a hobby, a wonderful, comforting wonderful craft, but in the rest of my life, as it were, my working life is with textiles, with batik and with indigo. So some of that might come up as the season starts. The indigo season is about to start in about a month or so. It's when my knitting, which has kept me company through the winter, will take a back seat, because I get very busy with my woven textiles and my batik work and my wearable artwork and all of that. So creating the next collection for my boutique, all of that will take up a lot of time. But today is about knitting, and we will talk about finished items. I have 2 finished items to share. Then one of those finished items, which you can see peeking from the side here on my dress form, one of the finished items will lead us into a conversation about freeform garment design, or knitting freeform garments. And I'm going to give you a few quick tips on how to conceptualize, how to sort of demystify this process of creating a garment out of knitted fabric, and give you a few, I would call them like mental constructs, mental handholds that you can use if you have ever been interested in creating your own garments, not using patterns, being more freeform, more organic in the way a garment takes shape. So I'm going to move on to that in the 3rd segment of the podcast. 4th segment, we will talk about what's on the needles. I have two things to show you. The 3rd one is in the house. So I'm podcasting from my textile studio where I do all my artwork, and we live in a little 1-room cottage, which is just a little walk away. And unfortunately, I didn't bring my 3rd cast on here. So we'll talk about the 3 things that are on the needle. 2 I will show you. Then we will move on to the final 2 parts of the podcast, where I will do a draw of the giveaway I ran in episode 11. I will draw the winner, or rather announce the winner, because I have already drawn the winner. And I have one final giveaway to run. I know this is the 3rd giveaway in 3 episodes, but this is going to be the last giveaway for this year. So I think the next time I run a giveaway on this channel will be in probably December, around Christmas. That's always a very nice time to do a giveaway. So this is my final giveaway for this rest of the year. So I hope you'll stick around and participate in that. And that's it. That's what we have today. So let me take a little sip of my tea, and we will jump straight into the first part of the podcast, which is to introduce you to my new series on YouTube, which is called Amble and Knit. So as I said, Amble and Knit was started so that I can have some conversations and some chatter and let some, things evolve and unfold that would take up too much time in this main podcast. It would make these podcasts way too long. So I started a little supplementary series, and it's called Amble and Knit because I wanted to feel very much like you have gone on a walk, at the end of a busy week. You have your best friend with you, or some other close person to your heart, and you're just walking down the forest path, ambling down the path, and maybe you have your knitting with you, maybe you don't, but your heart is let loose, and you simply have to speak about things that have been in your mind and in your heart, and you just words come out. I wanted to feel like that, and all the chatter is about knitting and the knitting world and our craft. And that's what it's about. So if you missed that video, please do go and check it out. The first episode that I did, I was talking a lot about consumerism and the urgent need to reevaluate our consumption patterns and our consumer behaviors, and the very, very urgent need to look at what our consumption patterns have done to the planet, to the soil, and that there really isn't very much time left to redress these issues. That if we are to change some of the incredibly dire predictions that scientists, people who know what they're talking about, from organizations that have been committed to studying the soil and the impacts of human activity on the climate and on the soil. Institutions that are making these incredibly dire predictions for the state of our soil and the state of food security in the coming decade and more. If we are to reverse those trends, these conversations are not a luxury that we can indulge in. We have to have them. We have to change behaviors. We have to make people aware of the reality on the ground. So I'm talking about all of that in the first episode of Amble and Knit, with relation to knitting. So, kind of rooting it in an activity that we are already engaging in, that we are already familiar with, and that is close to our heart. Which is knitting. So that's what the first episode is about. Now, I want to take a few moments to address a couple of things. In this episode of the podcast, I won't take too much of your time, but I want to take a little moment to make a point that I will also follow up in the second episode of Amble and Knit. Don't worry about that. I will bring this exact same thing up in that next episode. But I just wanted to make a point, if there are people who were there in that last video and were engaging in the chatter with me, something that's come up from reading a lot of your comments and the conversation that's unfolded in the comment field of that video. So, as I see it, there are two parts to this entire situation. Firstly, when I'm on the internet, when I'm on YouTube, even Instagram, to a smaller degree Instagram, I'm using it less and less these days, to be very honest. But when I'm online, when I'm on YouTube, when I'm looking at videos, I look at an incredibly diverse variety of opinions, of activities, of people, of different parts of the world, of worldviews. I look at very many different things. And when it comes to knitting related videos, whether it's podcasts or anything to do with knitting, if I'm sitting and watching them, I look at a whole variety of things and a whole different gamut of people. Like I said in the last episode, I don't always stick with the same podcasters, depending on how original they're being, authentic they're being. There's a small set that I stick to quite closely, but for the most part, I'm always trying many different types of podcasts or videos on YouTube. And the point of the conversation that I started on Amble and Knit was not that we need to closet ourselves or that we need to avoid narratives that are so obviously consumerist, so obviously sort of damaging in terms of continuously enabling and empowering the wrong type of behavior, the same types of behavior that has brought us to this place, consumption habits especially, that has brought us to this place as a species, and the damage we have done to the soil and the climate. And I watch a lot of different people, and I believe avoidance is not the answer. So there's two aspects to this. I think every individual has the responsibility to manage how they respond to the information that they are receiving. And your level of compulsiveness, if I can call it that, like my level of compulsiveness will determine how I react or how I respond or how I behave when I'm given the kind of information that you mostly see, I think, in many of them, especially the most popular podcasts, is highly consumerist, and the encouragement of acquisition and extraction and production and all these highly industrial ways of behaving that have brought us to where we are right now. So it is on me to manage how I respond to that. So I can look at somebody who's encouraging that kind of behavior just by the videos they make and the things that are encouraged in a certain video. But it is up to me to manage how I then respond, because human beings are, for the most part, for the vast majority of the part, everybody is doing the best they can with the capabilities that they have, with the limited set of, limited information that they have, with the limited awareness that they have. Everyone is doing, in the end, only what their capabilities and limitations allow. And we cannot find solutions by simply avoiding everyone who is, let's say, opposite to or different from the worldview we would like to see empowered on the internet. That's not what I was saying. I think it's up to individuals to manage our own behavior. And I am one of those people who firmly believes that you should be able to engage with and view a diverse array of worldviews. And on YouTube, I find that's easier to do because YouTube, for the most part, and this is just for me personally, YouTube seems to give me and recommend a far wider group of worldviews, and is not the same echo chamber that, for example, Instagram is a terrible, terrible echo chamber. And I found that it's become such a polarized and one-sided place. It's one of the reasons I hardly, I don't use it as much as I used to anymore. But YouTube, I found, sorry for the sniffles, by the way. It's very cold in the studio today. There's it's not the most well-insulated place, and when I get cold, I tend to sniffle. So YouTube, for the most part, gives me a much wider variety of differing and different worldviews and different opinions and different types of videos and different types of people. Maybe that's true because I already like to expose myself to different voices and dissenting voices and things like that. I am that is what I grew up in, not to just be around people who think and feel and look exactly the same as I do, and to consider anyone else who dissents or anyone else who argues differently as an enemy. I wasn't raised that way. It's a very alien way of thinking for me, of looking at the world. A very divisive, very polarizing way, which I think is something that has come definitely out of the United States, but it's sort of a Western worldview in general. It's very alien to me, and I don't participate in it. So because of that, I find that this whole issue of personal responsibility is of prime importance. And of course, that needs to go hand in hand with what I spoke of, that these platforms give us so much empowerment. We can empower the right type of narratives, or we can empower completely dysfunctional narratives. And I think for the vast majority of the time, it is the dysfunctional that is popular, that is trendy, that gains the most views, that is empowered, that is audible, that is loud and amplified. Unfortunately, that is the nature of the world we live in right now. And it's about redressing that balance by empowering more conversations that are about addressing issues that are urgent in reality, not just in the human mind. Because when it comes to soil health, when it comes to the state of the planet's soil and the climate and sort of uncertainty, the very real uncertainty we're facing as an entire species on the planet going forwards, it is not a matter of opinion or debate. It is a matter of reality. These are physical realities of the planet we live in, and they will have a very real consequence if we do not address them now. So the consequences are not up to each person's opinion. When Mother Nature doesn't care about our opinions or our ideologies or our beliefs or any of that, or whether we're debating these things or not, Mother Nature just is. It's existential reality. It's material, it's physical. And when we no longer have the soil to grow the food to put on our plates and our tables, well, we no longer have food to eat. It's that black and white. That's that simple. Of course, the manifestation of that might be a little bit more complex depending on where you're living on the planet, but the reality will be the same. So I think both need to be encouraged, that we must not attack people who don't necessarily engage in this conversation, who might be exhibiting behaviors that are contrary to what we want to see happening in the world. That's not the point. That's not the point to point fingers and say, you are evil, or you are bad, or I will never look at your videos again. Absolutely not. I watch so many different types of podcasters. I watch so many different types of videos, and I take what I want. I take what positives I want from that, and I leave the things that I do not want, because I am a conscious human being, and I can either compulsively be impacted by what I'm seeing, or I can consciously choose what I take and what I discard. And I think that part is really important. And of course, each person, as I said, if you ever choose to start a podcast or anything, you need to be very careful. You need to become responsible for what you are empowering, and to educate and make yourself aware of the issues in this world, and see how all of our behaviors, whether it's a podcast we're making, whether it's a yarn we're buying, or needles we're buying, or what kind of attitude even that we have to our knitting, all of that has an impact on the planet, but also on each other. And having that awareness as our background, I think naturally human beings want to do the right thing, and will do their best from their limited perspectives, from their limited understandings, from their limitations, because we are all limited. And having that level of awareness brings a lot of compassion when we see people behaving in a way that maybe we don't really agree with and don't think is the best for the planet as a whole. So I have made that point. I hope I have not taken too much time to make it. And like I said, I will repeat myself in the next episode of Amble and Knit as well. Now, chatter aside, let's get on with the knitting. I hope I haven't lost half of you in that first part of the episode. Perhaps I should have been strategic and left that for like the middle of the... No, I can't. I'm terrible at being strategic. I'm too spontaneous to be strategic. So let's talk about finished items. Yes. So I have 2 finished items to show you today. Let me quickly check on my phone, because I do still have a 8-month-old nursling. Ooh, sorry for that. Oh, yes, he has woken up. So I am, I have an 8-month-old nursling who is at home, and I can't actually podcast with him in the studio anymore. He's crawling. He's crawling at the most incredible speed. He climbs over everything, gets himself into the worst kind of trouble. And the studio with all the, the sewing machines and the loom and all this stuff, it's not a safe place for him. And there's always pins around and needles. And so I can't, unfortunately, have that sweet little creature in the studio as I podcasted, while I podcasted, as I did before, because I know some of you really enjoyed hearing his little noises and stuff. And his noises are not little anymore. That's the thing, that he's quite loud. So just keeping an eye on the phone. So knitted items. Let's carry on with finished items. So here we have one of my finished items. I haven't even shown this on Instagram, so you are seeing this for the first time. Isn't that gorgeous? I hope you can see it and that the camera is focusing. Well, this is what I call a swatch cowl. So those of you who know Elizabeth Zimmerman and love her as much as I do, she is the woman who brought me to knitting. I had known about knitting and I had been exposed to knitting. Even my grandmother tried to teach me how to knit when I was like a teenager, I think. But I was never sold on it until I found Elizabeth Zimmerman on YouTube many years ago. And this is from one of her most well-known books, this pattern. It's called The Knitter's Almanac. And of course, many of you will know that. And this is the pattern that she uses for a sweater that I believe she calls the Chainmail sweater, but the chapter in which this appears, it's called A Difficult Sweater, Not Really. If you know Elizabeth Zimmerman, you know how she writes they're not patterns, they're an experience. Just to read each of those chapters in the Knitter's Almanac is such an intimate, such a beautiful, such a educational experience as a knitter. And so this is a swatch cowl. And if you know, like I said, Elizabeth Zimmerman, she always encourages you to do a swatch cap, she calls it. So if whenever you're trying out a new colorwork pattern or any new techniques, she has you practice them on a swatch that is the size of a cap, because that is a significant portion of knitting, and you get to get a very accurate idea of gauge, and you get to practice something complex for a significant amount of time, not just, you know, something that's 6 inches by 6 inches. And so that when you move on to a large item like a garment, you are quite clear about how things need to go. So this is from that. And instead of doing a cap, I did a cowl, because I don't own a single hand-knitted cowl in my collection. So I thought I had to fix that situation stat. And this is knit in Nutiden from my last Nutiden order. And if you can see me holding this, I think you'll agree that this was one of these situations where the pattern and the yarn came together in the most beautiful way, in the most beautiful pairing. One of the things that Elizabeth Zimmerman is trying to achieve with this chainmail sweater that she did is to create the illusion of colors blending one into each other and going up the sweater. So in the case of Nutiden, that was not a very difficult thing to achieve, because as you know, if you have ever knit with Nutiden, their colors each season are sort of released in a way that there's a lot of complementary colors, but contrasting colors, of course, but there's a lot of complementary ones that you can use to create grades and shades that work very beautifully together. Just 1 minute. Hello, welcome back. I'm sorry for the small interruption, but I know a few people had complained on episode 10 that I was sniffling and that they couldn't bear to listen to me anymore because of all the sniffles. But hey, I can't help it. I'm a tropical born Lankan girl, and when it gets as cold as it is right now, covered in snow and freezing cold outside, it's this Lankan girl is going to sniffle, because like I think I mentioned this in one of my vlogs, that the underfloor insulation of the studio has been, let's say, adopted, or rather stolen, by the Douglas squirrels that live in our forest. So you can blame them for the amount of sniffling I'm doing right now. But I just went to sort of blow my nose and hope that will prevent some more sniffling. So what Elizabeth Zimmerman was hoping to achieve with this pattern was this beautiful change of shades of color, and it's just perfect. Nutiden is perfect for working this kind of pattern, but I would recommend any unspun yarn as long as you can get shades that are close enough to each other but also contrasting, so that you can create this illusion of the entire fabric changing in shades, going upwards, up the sweater in the case of the pattern, but in the cowl here. So it's a very interesting way of creating a colorwork technique that I had never done before, and I am so in love with it. I am now imagining garments of my own design made this way, and it's done using increases and decreases and cleverly placed ways to move the foreground color over the background, while the background itself continues to switch in colors to create the illusion of many more colors being knitted at the same time than there actually is, because at any one point you're only using 2 colors. However, when I say 2 colors, I have to tell you that this was knit with one part Nutiden and the other part is with Icelandic Einband, which is the Icelandic lace weight by Istex, and that has become my favorite way to knit with unspun wool. And I will show you here, these are the colors My little basket of fluff here. These are the colors I used. This is the main color, the background color, the main background color, but there were also lots of others which were little samples that I've actually run out of that I can't show you. So there was some of this purplish, gorgeous, I mean absolutely deep violet, like a deep burgundy with brown on the inside. And this is the main background color. Then the main pattern foreground color was done in this sort of a pinkish with flecks of gold is the best I can describe. And the Einband that I used, so I would hold each of the Nutiden with some Einband. So as you can see here. So this one was held with this one. And this is a sort of a coppery, coffee copper color, which forms a contrast really with this pinkish one, but it brings out the copper in the pink unspun more if you use this. But instead, if you use a pink Einband, it brings the pink out more. And this is something I've discovered that I really enjoy, this way of knitting with unspun wool, is that depending on what you hold it with, the characteristics, the color and tonal characteristics of the Nutiden or the unspun will change. And using those to my benefit, to my advantage, is how I created those changing shades in the cowl, and it's such fun to see it just unfolding before you. So this is my new favorite way of using unspun, is that it is always combined with Einband, with Icelandic wool, which of course I love anyway. So that's how this has been created. It is incredibly soft because of the unspun, but also has plenty of structure and strength to stand up. As you can see, I will put it on. It's quite tall for a cowl, I think, but I like it because it has that. The Einband gives it strength. The Icelandic, of course, gives it a lot of strength, so it stands up beautifully instead of flaring out, which I think Nutiden has the tendency to do. So it's lovely. It's like wearing a very high collar, and you can even do that and put a little baby shawl pin or a little pin here and hold it closer to your neck. But I find this is very insulating too, because it creates a little pocket of air all around you, and it's perfect. It's perfect in every way. And what I'm hoping to do with this really, and this is something I probably won't get to wear much until the winter that's coming at the end of this year, is I want to wear this with the jumper that's I actually have cast it on and it's sitting in the house. I'm moving on to knitting the main jumper now that I have practiced all the techniques on this cowl. And what I want to do is to wear that jumper, the chainmail jumper, and wear this on top almost as a detachable turtleneck, as a detachable collar that brings the jumper up into my face and adds this second layer of warmth. And I think that's going to work very well, because the chainmail jumper that you find in Elizabeth Zimmerman's book is actually, it's knitted in one straight tube, and it's steeked on the sides, and the top there's no definite neckline. So there's no sort of coming up towards the neck. So I think this would help to bring the entire jumper further up. So anyway, that's the plan for that. And as you can see, all my little balls of wool are already ready. I've wound them up on my hand. I wind all my balls by hand. I don't use any cranky thingies. And something that I'll be speaking of on Amble and Knit is the value of changing more of our processes when it comes to knitting and this craft towards hand processes, and doing things by hand the way these crafts are practiced for thousands of years. But because I am finding myself, it's my winter of unspun, and because I'm finding myself knitting with so much unspun, which I'm always combining with Icelandic and Icelandic lace weight, my lovely, lovely husband, who is a very talented woodworker, he went and very quickly, actually, this was made in like, I don't know, 2-3 hours, maybe less. He went and found a little maple branch which had come down from our last storm, actually, a very small branch, and he turned it into one of these nostepinnes, which is like a traditional yarn winder. And I've been winding these on this, well, more like starting them off, because Icelandic lace weight is very fine, and when you try to wind that by hand, I find that my hands get very cramped because I'm holding on to this tiny, tiny little bit ball for a long time before it starts to fill out enough to let my hands relax as I keep winding. So I found that starting off the winding process on basically what is just a tapered piece of wood, that's all it is, tapered so that you can, move that yarn out of the winder or the piece of wood easily. I found that using this to start off a ball helped to stop my hand from cramping up from holding this tiny little thing for such a long time before it got to a manageable size. So there we go. I have everything wound up and ready to go for that jumper, and I'm very, very excited. It is slow going. I have to say that it is extremely, extremely engaging to knit. Like, you really get into the flow of, creating this pattern and doing the color changes as you go on. But because it is all over color work and also stitch manipulation from time to time, it is slow going. So I don't expect that I'll be finished with that jumper anytime soon, depending on how much time I have to give to it, because the weather is also warming up. And that means my main work as an artist starts to take, center stage, and I have less and less time for knitting. So I'm very excited though, because when it is finished, it is going to look fabulous. I absolutely know it. So there we are, my first finished item. Now my second finished item is, again, sitting right here, and I really hope already that this episode is not taking too much time. Yeah, I'll bring it over. Now, I don't know if you can see it. Nah, yeah, it's a little bit too high, so I'm probably gonna have to lift up the camera, move back a bit, and show you this while it is on the dress form, and then I will put it on and you'll see it. So let's carry on with that. So I hope that gave you a good idea, or a better idea than I could have done having it over here, to show you how the garment took shape. So as some of you remember, this was made, these were the triangles that I've been knitting since episode 10. And I asked you all to guess what these triangles were going to be turned into. And many of you, had some good guesses. But this is what I was always meaning to make with it, as a sort of wraparound, great big woolen hug. And I think I've achieved that. It's constructed entirely out of triangles, as I said, and it's just been the most wonderful experience just knitting it and bringing it together. And something I did want to show you is this beautiful, beautiful crab stitch. It's called crochet edging. And, it took me a while before I decided that this would be the edging that I would use, because I was tossing up between using an I-cord edging and using a crochet edging. But I didn't want this to look like so many other garments and projects that are out there that are garter stitch edged with I-cord. It has I seem to be seeing so many of them, and I didn't want this to look like that. I wanted it to have a much more unique, much more, a different feel to it. And I think choosing this crab stitch, which is fast becoming one of my favorite edgings. I've used it before on garter stitch as well. It's becoming a favorite way to edge and finish a knitted garment. Was a very good call, choosing the crochet crab stitch. It's basically a reverse single crochet. It's much, much subtler than I-cord. It gives a really nice, neat edge especially because the garment was constructed in pieces. And there was no, all the gauge was different between each triangle. The edges were not always, matched up. I was not counting stitches. I was just going by general size of each triangle, trying to keep each triangle, at the same size. So because of that, the edges needed to be tamed, and crochet does a much better job, I think, of taming edges than something like I-cord, because crochet is a lot more forgiving, and you can, feed your hook through areas that are not quite lining up and bring the fabric together so that it can behave and, go into the shape that you want it to. And it's given it almost like a corded effect, like a sort of a sewn on corded edging or a corded trimming. And I really like that. And I think it's most obvious here on these sleeve openings, which are also lined with that same crab stitch edging in a bit of a contrast, wool. And so the whole thing just came together really well. Now, the only thing remaining to do here is these crocheted braids, which is another thing I'll speak about in a bit. I need to find the best position to put my final crochet braid into so that I can tie up the wraparound front, because I had one here on this edge where one triangle, this is actually a seam, even though you can't quite see it. This is one triangle meeting another triangle, and I had it on that seam, one more crochet braid that I could use to tie and close up the front. But I found that it wasn't sitting as well on the body with the cord there. So I think I'm going to move the cord a little bit closer to what is the side seam. Of course, there is no real side seam, but towards the side of the body, so that this can be brought in more and closed that way. Or I will have two, that way, depending on what my needs are, I can tie it here or tie it at the very side of the body. So lots of things to say about this, really. I mean, I think I've probably said quite a few things while I was, showing you the garment on the dress form and then while wearing it. But I really, really encourage this kind of making with knitted fabric, because knitted fabric especially is so suited to going freeform, because it's so malleable, especially if you are knitting with real wool, with proper, untreated, unprocessed wool, it is such a malleable thing. You can stretch it. It's so forgiving compared to woven fabrics. As somebody who deals almost entirely with wovens in my work and in my artwork, I can tell you how much more forgiving knitted fabric is to being molded to the human body, to be formed. And this is where I want to give you a few tips here on freeform garment design. Let's go to that next. I want to finish talking about this. So the garment itself is very heavy. It's a lot of wool. It's carrying a lot of wool. So the weight is very comforting. There's a lot of fabric, a lot of wool fabric here. And I deliberately kept the armholes as just armholes and did not put in sleeves. I thought about sleeves. I even knitted up something that would become a sleeve or would have become a sleeve. But I decided against it because this now has become a truly all-weather garment for the climate that we live in here, where apart from 1 or 2 weeks in the summer, it can be very cold most of the year. And there are many cold days where you want to have something more than just, a very light cardigan. You want to have something more, cozy and heavy on. And this is perfect because oftentimes I find if I wear something with sleeves, it's too warm. It sort of closes up the garment and makes it more insulating, which means it can't really be worn in the warmer months. But if you just allow openness, allow airflow, which is what these are essentially, these are airflow holes, you can wear it throughout the year. And I have been wearing it for the past few weeks. I leave it around the house to see how much I pick it up. And it's interesting that in the winter with longer sleeved garments inside, I pick this up now even a little bit more than my favorite, Korean kimono style thing that I often wear. It's interesting. It's almost taking its place. So so that was the reasoning behind keeping the sleeves out or keeping wide open sleeve holes, armholes, sleeve holes, whatever, armscye, that's the technical term. So let's carry on now to giving you a few tips on freeform garment design. I keep looking at the screen. I'm very sorry for doing that. I will try to keep focused on your eyes. Not in a creepy way. So freeform garment design. Here are some tips. First off, think in basic shapes. So this is something I often do with my other textile work, of course. And like I said, I was trained with, in old school tailoring. So I have a tendency to think of a garment in pieces. And I think the minute you start deconstructing the image of a garment into pieces, the ability to conceive of a garment coming together becomes much easier. It's much more manageable. So think in basic shapes when you're thinking about creating a garment or a shape of a garment. So squares, rectangles, any slight variations of those two, triangles, circles, half circles. Think of your basic shapes and look at a body and see how can this shape be put together with other shapes, either exactly the same. Often you can simply make a garment out of just rectangles or just squares, or in my case, just triangles, or even just a circle. And see how you can take that shape and drape it over a body to create the illusion or the shape of a garment. So think in basic shapes is one thing. Secondly, don't be afraid of seams. I don't know what it is I'm seeing in the knitting world of this fear of seams, that somehow putting a seam or making a knitted garment with seams is something terrifying and terrible and a waste of time. It's not. Seams are a very important part of giving structure to any garment made out of any type of fabric. And even in, this is something I did during my MFA, I studied for a year and I did not continue, but something I've always been long interested in is zero waste pattern cutting, because traditional forms of pattern cutting can create a lot of waste of fabric. And that does not line up very much at all with my ethos around living sustainably and creating as little waste as possible. But even in zero waste pattern cutting, you will see that, especially among the masters of zero waste, where there are many pattern cutters in Japan who are masters of this way of creating garments, woven garments. Even in that kind of design, seams or false seams or fake seams are used to create structure, to give a garment shape so that it hangs in a certain way on your body. So don't be afraid of seams. Seamless garments, when it comes to knitted fabric, is one type of garment. It is not the only type. And I really don't think it should be the only type you explore. Seamed garments perform in a completely different way, look different, hang differently on the body, and will wear differently when you're talking about longevity of a garment. So don't be afraid of seams, and use them strategically so that the garment hangs in a certain way on your body. That takes me, we can move on to the next point I want to make, is using seams. Create balance points. So be aware of the main balance points on your body. And for me, those are most definitely the most important balance point is your shoulders. So where your shoulders are and what kind of line there is on your shoulder, because the shoulder is where your entire garment will hang from. So making sure that no matter how freeform and sort of puzzled together the rest of your garment will be, and as you can see, this garment is like that. It's very much put together however I could find to make it look like a garment. The one place I didn't compromise on, where I didn't cobble it, was the shoulder point. So this is your main balance point, and that is the point that I spent a lot of time, and it's the place where I brought the triangles together first to ensure that the first seams that I made fell on the shoulder point, and that has the strongest seams. So that's a very important one. And of course, the neckline is another place, or wherever the garment opens or closes forms its own balance point, which is why it's taken me a bit of time to figure out where this closure needs to go, and where I was really happy that this inside closure came together really well in covering that and giving that side of the garment the structure it needs so it falls properly on my body. So think in seams, think in balance points on your body, and I would say another very important balance point is your center back. So the center back, if you look at this garment, or if you can remember, there is this almost straight, not perfectly straight, but an almost straight line. And that is one of those main seams which so when I was conceiving sort of puzzling, putting the puzzle pieces of the triangles together to form the garment, that is another place that I focused on, that I wanted to make sure it was absolutely straight, or as straight as I could get in the first part of the center back seam. I wanted to make sure that that was a strong place with a perpendicular line. It's one of those places where gravity has an effect on the human form. You know, when you're standing and your garment is sitting on you, it hangs off your shoulders, but it follows the line of your vertebra, of your spine, which is what gravity is acting on to create that line going down, you know, with the direction pointing towards the earth. So that was another point that you need to keep in mind when you have a freeform garment, to ensure that your garment looks balanced and hangs balanced on that point, and that point is as straight as you can get it. And a seam is a very, very convenient, a very strong way to create those spots and make sure that the garment is balanced in those spots. A very convenient way. And I think that's it. Oh, yes, the final point is don't go for perfection. You must embrace asymmetry. If you want to experiment with freeform design, and if you want to end up with something that doesn't look like anything on Instagram or anywhere online, if you want that level of originality in what you're wearing, you must embrace asymmetry, especially with this type of garment design. Because symmetry, to create something symmetrical, you need to follow a certain set of steps. You need to follow a certain pattern to create symmetry, on your body. However, if you want to be freeform, you will almost always end up with an asymmetrical garment. So like, for example, this armhole here is slightly wider than the one here, and you have to be okay with it as long as it hangs on your body properly and it functions in the way you want it to. Let go of perfectionism, let go a little bit of symmetry, and embrace the sort of uniqueness that comes out of an asymmetrical garment. And I think if you can keep those points in mind, I think go and have fun. Choose a basic shape, choose a wool that's real wool that will block and stretch and expand and shrink and do all these kinds of things to make that process of creating a garment easier on you. And and just have fun. That's the main point. When I started making these triangles, my entire idea was that I was going to have a lot of fun always having a triangular stretch of fabric to work on using these beautiful indigo dyed wool fabrics from these incredible wool women, who I'm now wearing on me, from these small flocks, from these wonderful shepherdesses, and the incredible work they do with sheep, and the beautiful way in which this wool has come into the world, honoring the animal, honoring the land, honoring ancestral techniques. It's just all of that I'm wearing now, which is quite special. So if you want to end up with something like this, you just got to go and have some fun, and choose the kind of wool that will give you that deep, pleasurable experience, and then and just see how you go. And it's wool, it's knitting. It's if it absolutely looks terrible when you have finished putting it all together, you can just unwind it, take the seams out and re-knit it into something else. But it will be such a wonderful learning experience that you simply cannot get by just following a pattern, and ending up with a garment that is there, that, everyone else has on Instagram or Ravelry or whatever it is that you use. This is unique. This can never be replicated. That is the great thing about freeform design. It gives you something that you will never see again, that somebody else wearing it. So it's your own. It creates a very nice relationship with your body and what you are wearing. So let's carry on to the next segment of the podcast, which is on the needles. What do I have on the needles? I have 3 things on the needle, only 2 of which I can show you today. So this, do you remember how I said I am never knitting socks for my husband again? I failed. I relented. I gave in. I am knitting him socks again. He is absolutely horrible on hand knitted socks. He's a big guy. And he's always outdoors. Almost all the work he does has him outdoors and wearing these great big clumping boots. And he's hard on his socks, he just wears right through them. So a couple of years ago, I decided I'm not knitting you any more socks. And I just saw his poor feet the other day covered in these store-bought socks with nylon on them. And I thought, my heart just, can't help it. I'm weak. So I cast on another pair of socks. Now this is inspired by my Adivasi socks, which I showed in the previous episode of the podcast. And I think this is pretty much going to be the next iteration of the Adivasi sock pattern, which probably won't actually end up as a pattern. I think I'm going to take a leaf from Elizabeth Zimmerman's book. Sorry that this keeps opening because I don't have that closure there. I need to work on that today and get it closed up. I'm going to take a leaf out of Elizabeth Zimmerman's book and do pithy directions instead of a pattern. I think it's so much more of a sensible way to do it. Once I have knitted this up, I will give a set of directions, probably in the form of a blog post, if you are so interested to go and knit a pair of socks exactly like this. I think if nobody ever wrote another pattern from this day forwards, I think the next 2 generations of knitters will still have plenty of patterns to knit with, because, oh my God, there are so many knitting patterns in the world today. So many. I don't see any reason why I need to contribute to that, especially when it's such a simple thing that has been done a million times before, which is a stranded colorwork toe-up sock. So it was started at the toe, and I put a little bit of, already put a little bit of this, a little bit of stranding, just 1 row of stranding. It is being knitted up in a 1 strand. Well, actually, that's not true. It's being knitted up in 3 things. So, winter of unspun, remember? So this is Istex Plotulopi, held together with Istex Einband, my Icelandic love. So there's the Icelandic, because I have to have it in everything. And there is Istex Lettlopi, which is forming the pattern color. So this is the background, this is the pattern. Held together, creating double thickness of fabric only where I want it, though. So I put a little bit of double thickness there, because that spot right there is where he tends to wear them off quite fast. And if when he's wearing them, I see that, okay, that area needs to be enlarged a bit, it doesn't matter. I'm just going to go ahead, and I think I'll make a little heart to say, see how much I love you. I make you hand-knitted socks, even though you will destroy them. Put a little heart of, duplicate stitches, just so that there's a bit more double thickness there, and it will hopefully last a bit longer. And here, the toe-up sock leading into a very standard fleagle heel with a gusset. So I started the stranded color work about, I don't know, like 2 or 3 rows into the gusset. I think next time I make socks, though, I will start it at the very beginning of the gusset, so that that entire area at the bottom of the foot, there it is protected with double layer of fabric. And so I carried on the pattern during the gusset, and of course I have just now completed the heel turn with this wonderful stranded heel, and I love it. Look at it. I mean, it's not even blocked yet. It's all very scrunched up on the needle, but it already looks very pretty. And this is something I really, really love. It looks pretty, and it's so functional. It's going to make sure that it'll last longer on his feet than the last pair of socks I knitted for him. And I get to do something that I really enjoy, which is purling in colorwork. I really do enjoy it. When I'm knitting the rest of the sock or knitting standard colorwork, I knit with both my hands. But when it comes to purling in colorwork, I take both colors onto my right hand, because I find that manipulating 2 yarns while purling is easier with one hand versus both hands. That makes sense. Yeah. So ways to go on that. Knit up the cuff, then the second sock, and then we'll be done. We'll have a nice pair of socks, hopefully, to show you by the next podcast. So that's one item on the needles. The second item on the needles is also another Plotulopi and Einband project, which I have cast on, but is in the house, and I can't show you. It's just the cast on, so there's hardly anything to show anyway. It's another Vedis Jonsdottir. Again, please, Icelandic people, correct my pronunciation. I need your help. Please do leave me, come on Instagram, leave me maybe a voice message that you can leave me saying, this is how you pronounce this word, Ducky. I really want to get it right. So please do give me some help with my Icelandic pronunciation. I feel that is very important. So with Plotulopi and Einband, here's the rest of the Plotulopi from knitting my daughter's colorwork sweater, the Lopa Pesa that I knitted for her, which was a matchy one of the one I knit for myself, which was again another Vedis Jonsdottir pattern, Vedis's pattern. Let's not say the last name. So this is another one that Istex released, I think it was like a few weeks ago, another free pattern on the Istex website, and it looks gorgeous. And I was looking at this leftover wool, the leftover Plotulopi, and thinking, I want to use this up because that's what I do. I use up what I have before I buy anything new. And I wanted to come up with a good way to use up the Plotulopi and the Einband that I have. And this pattern is perfect for it. So it's going to be another Lopa Pesa. That's on the needles. Cannot show it to you, obviously, because it's just a little ring of cast on. And what else is on my needles is actually some, not syrup. This is in one of these Dutch appelstroop containers. I hold my projects in all kinds of things. Baskets, often. Most of the time I'm holding projects in these baskets. I think you saw this one as well. These are my project holders. I pick these up in thrift stores, in the local Goodwill. Will often find baskets for like $1, $2, $3. In the local junk stores, sometimes they'll have a row of baskets for, almost free. Sometimes they'll put a price tag on it, but often the lady will say, oh, just take one. So I'm always on the lookout for these secondhand, thrifted, or junk store baskets to store my knitting in. I think I have one project bag that I brought years ago. I often mean to sew my own project bags, but I find that I just don't have the time. I just don't have the time often. So, and here is a little tin that holds my crochet thread with which I am crocheting. Ooh, using this ridiculously tiny hook. Look at how tiny that is. That's 1.5 millimeter. I know you can get much finer than this for like very, very fine, like tatting type crochet. But I am making, again, with the sniffling. I can't help it. I'm so sorry. I will attempt to be warmer next time. I am making my first crocheted lace. Isn't that beautiful? So this has a purpose in mind while I crochet this. So this is called tape lace, and it's my first experience of crocheting with such fine thread. I shall wait for that to pass because that's quite shaking the entire studio. And eating up valuable podcasting time. We shall wait with patience so that our fellow human beings can carry on the activities that keep all of this ticking along. That's important, isn't it? Knowing that you are just simply a part of a whole and that your needs and desires don't come first. So, all right, helicopter has passed. So my first experience of crocheting with such fine hook and fine thread, making tape lace. So I am hoping that I will get enough of this tape lace to put into a night dress. So a sort of a Victorian style night dress that I've already designed it. I've made it out of one of my own designs a couple of years ago, and I want to make another one for the summer. And I'm thinking sort of to put this either on like a yoke as a sort of a lace insert, the kind that you find in heirloom patterns, or on the sleeve as an insertion, a lace insertion. It's very common in heirloom sewing. So, I think it's going to look very pretty once it's all done. This is unblocked, so once it's blocked, it'll flatten out quite a bit. It's really, really not as complicated as you might think when you see these, laces. Of course, it grows a little slowly, but it's also very open. So it moves faster than you think. It's not as difficult as you think. And if you've ever wanted to try out crochet lace, all I can say is, if there's time in your life to do it, it's not hard. It's not difficult. It's basically just a mixture of openings created by crocheting things together and then, crocheting in the same space to create these shapes. And it just kind of goes up. It's very simple. Once you memorize a pattern, it's just very straightforward to keep going. So that is something that is on the hook, I guess, rather than on the needles in my little apple stroke jar. I will find whatever jar I can to store my projects in. And that's that. So yes, those are all the knitting and crochet projects. Be closed. And the final thing, 2 things we need to deal with at the end of the podcast is the draw for the giveaway. Let me quickly again check on this baby. Yeah. So we have drawn the winner of the previous giveaway that I ran on episode 11, and the winner's name is, for the 4K giveaway rather, it might be the cold that I'm struggling to speak today as well. Giveaway winner, here we go. So the giveaway winner's name is Tia Dreyer. So I hope I pronounced your name properly, Tia Dreyer. I'll have your name pop up here on the side, and it will be in the description box. The 4K giveaway, I asked people to let me know what their knitting dreamings were, and so many of you joined in, so thank you so much for participating. I so enjoyed reading of all your plans for this coming year, and so thanks for participating. And the winner, I will please ask you to contact me either in the comment field of this video or by popping over on Instagram and sending me a DM. That might be actually a very straightforward way to do it, so that we can get an address off you and ship off that little project purse that was up for the giveaway. Now that that is taken care of, let's move on to the final segment of the podcast, where I am going to be running my final giveaway for this year. But I will also be introducing a book. So before I start talking about this book, I want to make a note. So in general, I will not be doing paid promotions on this channel. It's something I always make sure that I write very clearly on my description boxes of each video, that I do not do paid promotions, and I have not and do not and will not monetize this channel in any way. However, whenever I'm talking about wool or different types of wool or books that I am reading or recommending this or that, it's all things that I have purchased myself, and it's all things that I find valuable and I just share with you. That's it. Paid promotions are not a thing I do. I've had a few people reach out to me on emails asking to promote this and that and send me this and that, and I deny all of them, and that's why I put it in pretty visible letters in my description box that I do not accept paid promotions, and don't do that on this podcast or anywhere on this channel. But this is not one of those instances. This is a different case. So this is a beautiful, beautiful book by Alexis Hoy. And Alexis got in touch with me and told me about her self-published book. And said, I've written this book, it's self-published, I really love your podcast, and I would love to see what you think of this book. And she sent me this copy, and I read through it because I am always up for books. This is something that I am, books and I, it's even closer knit than wool and I and knitting and I. So I could tell that this was, just from the way she spoke, I could tell that this was something that would resonate with me. And if I had just seen it sitting in a bookshelf, I would have picked it up. But as you know, self-published authors have a much harder time getting their work out there than people publishing through well-known publishing houses. So because this was at the very beginning of this journey of podcasting, I said, yes, sure, please send it to me, and I will make sure that I give you if I enjoy it, I will run a giveaway for it on my podcast. And I absolutely loved it. I have read through the book, I have read the story and the patterns, gone through all the beautiful patterns. It is an illustrated book of knitting, fiber, and fable. So it's actually a fictional work that follows you through the knitting patterns. So it's both a pattern book and a very beautifully written knitting story. It follows the journey of this young girl who is a knitter that I think many of us would be able to identify with, and about how knitting keeps her company, how knitting is the thread that binds her from the beginning of her story to the end. There's this great calamity that unfolds in her village, and she has to undertake this journey, to both a journey internally and a journey in the external world to, battle demons, both outside and within her, and how knitting holds her and roots her through this entire progress of her life. And fiber and small flock and small farms and working with real wool, all of that is expressed in the most beautiful way. It's a very readable story, very beautifully written. The patterns are gorgeous, clearly written and clearly illustrated with charts and everything you would expect from a high quality knitting publication is in here. And the illustrations, whenever there are illustrations, are done by the author herself. And I'm I'm flipping through this book to find you a very pretty one. It's a very beautiful illustration at the very end of the book, with a spinning wheel and a little child sleeping there. And I think one of my favorite patterns on here is, I think I would call it like the main pattern of the book. It's a cardigan. It's a cabled colorwork cardigan. I was just flipping and flipping to try and find it here. It's called... Oh, where is it? Oh, here it is. First, a Fable cardigan. So beautiful projects like that. Gorgeous cardigan. So again, this is a book that if I had seen in the library or on a bookshelf, I would certainly have got it myself, because I don't see often books that are both a story where a knitter and knitting is the protagonist or the main element of the plot line, and patterns at the same time. This is one of the few, this is probably the only one I've seen that way. So a beautiful addition to a knitter's library for sure. And I'm going to make this copy available as a giveaway copy. So if you want to join the giveaway, please read the rules of the giveaway in the description box below and enter the giveaway. You don't need to write anything special for this giveaway. You can just say StoryMaker giveaway is the hashtag. So StoryMaker giveaway, as long as you put that in your comment, you are joining in. But of course, feel free to leave me a comment about what type of knitting books you like. What is it that you really love about a knitting book? If you so desire, you can leave that as well. But all the rules are in the description box. And Alexis is also giving 20% off as a coupon for her patterns. And again, all of that information is also on the description box. So this is going to be my last giveaway that I do. And yeah, this is the last giveaway for this year until Christmas time. So if you want to, be in to win this beautiful, beautiful knitting book and storybook, please do join in. And now we have come to the end of episode 12 of the podcast. I really hope you enjoyed it. I have no idea currently sitting here in front of the camera how long this episode is going to be. I have a feeling it's going to be quite long. And I hope I have not rushed through it. There always seems to be so much to say and to share. And because of Amble and Knit being the supplementary show to this main podcast, I can talk about a lot of the things that I otherwise, leave out. But still, I will only be really podcasting like once a month, which means, I've collected quite a few things that I want to share with you by that time. So I hope it's not too long. I hope I didn't rush through it. As usual, please help me to make this experience of a knitting podcast and this experience of my YouTube channel better. by leaving me feedback, by leaving me comments, by telling me what you liked, telling me what you'd like to see more of, just engaging in the chatter. As I said, I appreciate all of your comments and I answer all of them. And please, if you have not subscribed and you enjoy the videos that you're seeing here, remember to subscribe. And if you have enjoyed this video, please give me a thumbs up. That helps for more people, more like-minded people, to keep finding these videos and to keep finding my little YouTube home. Yeah, I think that's all I have to say. And I will rush away now to my sweet little baby and cuddle him to me and give him a little nurse, because I'm sure he has missed me for the past hour or whatever I've been sitting here. I wish you all a wonderful, wonderful month ahead. I hope you find lots of time to keep your hands in wool. I hope you'll come and join me for the next Amble and Knit that will come out hopefully in another couple of weeks or so. And most importantly, find the pleasure, reclaim the pleasure of knitting, the pleasure, that thing that is so difficult to put into words, that initially caught us when we first picked up wool and needles and knit. Reclaim that pleasure in whatever way you can, and I hope you have a beautiful entry into early spring and that the cold dissipates soon for most of you. We are still covered in snow, of course, but I think spring is on its way. Things are budding. The birds are out. New life is incorrigible. Life will out. It is the way of the world, the way of nature. So I wish you all the very best, and I will see you next time. Ayubowan.